Hello and welcome to IAMC Radio and Podcast.
Today, we're going to explore the top news headlines for May 28th.
We've got quite a few stories lined up, 11 key headlines making news right now.
That's right, a real mix today, covering everything from local issues here in Nigeria to some major international developments.
So let's get straight into it. First up, a troubling situation in Abia State regarding education.
Yes, specifically in Edo Central School, reports from Monachi paint a pretty grim picture.
Grim is right. We're talking crumbling classrooms, broken ceilings, basically no furniture. Kids sitting on the floor.
And this is despite, a 120 billion education budget announced for 2025. A huge sum.
Exactly. And the state government talks about this Abia First program, rebuilding 200 model schools, better teacher welfare.
Right. The governor even announced it on X back in February. Focus on infrastructure, training, curriculum upgrades.
So the big question is, how does a school like Edo Central get overlooked? Especially when the community has apparently been asking for help repeatedly.
It really does raise questions about, how effectively these grand plans and budgets are translating into action on the ground, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Okay, moving on, let's talk infrastructure. Big news about the Lagos-Abidjan Highway Corridor.
Yes, the African Development Bank, the AFDB, they've confirmed a massive investment, $15 billion.
$15 billion. Wow.
Yeah.
That announcement came from the AFDB meetings in Abidjan.
That's correct. Dr. Adesina really emphasized how strategically important this is.
Connecting Nigeria, Benin, Togo, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire over 1,000 kilometers.
Exactly. The goal is boosting trade, cutting travel times, lowering logistics costs, really pushing that regional integration, especially with the AFCFTA in mind.
It's a potentially transformative project. And Dr. Adesina mentioned the bank's broader impact too, right? Billions invested across Africa.
He did. He reflected on his decade as president, mentioning $102 billion provided, with $55 billion specifically for infrastructure like this.
Significant stuff. Okay, let's shift back locally. There's some unrest at the National Sports Festival.
Yes. Reports are coming in about Ogun State athletes protesting. It seems to be over unpaid allowances.
Protesting where? Are they disrupting things?
Apparently blocking the entrance to the games village at Babcock University. So yes, potentially disrupting events, maybe at MKO Abiola Sports Arena and a Lake Sports Center too.
That's tough for the athletes involved. I heard the cycling contingent was affected this morning.
Yes, their events were scheduled early. And it's not the first issue, is it? There was that problem with the stadium lights during the 10,000 meters final earlier.
Right. Not a great look for the festival organizers. Hopefully it gets resolved quickly for the athletes' sake.
Let's hope so. On a, much more positive note, there's good news from Edo State.
Oh, what's happening there?
The State Health Insurance Commission has done something quite admirable. They've enrolled 450 orphans into the state health insurance scheme.
That's fantastic news. From registered orphanages.
Yes, 5 of them. And apparently they also helped settle some outstanding hospital bills for some of the children, too.
That's really making a difference. It sounds like part of a broader push for inclusivity.
It does. The commission mentioned their vision is to leave no one behind. This was part of a Children's Day outreach, visiting orphanages, health facilities, distributing gifts. Really commendable.
Good to hear. Okay, turning to the courts now. A lawsuit involving Google and GoDaddy seems to have hit a snag.
Yes, a $150 million suit filed by a Nigerian man, Chinugo Peter. It was stalled because the judge, Justice Obiora Egwatu, wasn't present.
Remind us, what's the core of the lawsuit?
Mr. Peter alleges that his domain, YouTubeaudio.com, and his business name were shut down after 8 years, and the rights were somehow transferred to Google.
8 years is a long time, so he's seeking compensation for a breach of contract, loss of goodwill.
Pretty much. Google, on the other hand, says the suit is unmeritorious. They've actually filed a counterclaim.
What's their argument?
Trademark infringement. They're arguing that YouTube audio is too similar to their YouTube brand and could cause confusion.
Interesting defense. So when's the next hearing?
It's been adjourned to July 16th. We'll have to wait and see.
Okay. Next up, a story about suspicious financial flows.
Yes, the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, the NFIU, has put out a report. They found over 48 billion in suspicious transactions going from Nigeria to Dubai and Hong Kong.
48 billion. Between when and when?
Between January 2021 and September 2024. The NFIU is warning financial institutions, calling these places emerging global hotspots for illicit financial flows.
That's a strong warning. How many reports are we talking about?
401 suspicious transaction reports, or STRs, about 29.6 billion linked to Dubai from 185 reports, and 18.6 billion to Hong Kong from 216 reports.
And the trend is increasing.
Sharply, from just regular 2 million flagged in 2021 to 32 billion in 2024 alone. It's a massive jump.
What does the NFIU think is behind this surge?
They point to regulatory loopholes, weaknesses in the system, also the use of shell companies, offshore accounts for secrecy, and generally weak enforcement. They even mentioned the 2020 Dubai leaks, suggesting this isn't entirely new.
Right. Definitely something that needs tighter monitoring. Okay, this next story is quite concerning, related to the Hajj pilgrimage.
Extremely concerning. Reports suggest thousands of Nigerian pilgrims currently in Saudi Arabia for the 2025 Hajj don't have access to the clinics they were supposed to have.
But didn't NHCON, the Hajj Commission, send a medical team? I remember reading about 300 personnel and drugs being procured.
They did. The national medical team was inaugurated back in April, but the problem is there are apparently no government-run clinics set up this year for the roughly 60,000 pilgrims.
So the medical team is there, but inactive.
That's the report. Over 3 weeks after arriving and still no clinics operational, there are some very serious allegations flying around.
Like what?
Allegations that the medical team list was, exploited, used to ferry allies and family members, not just medical staff.
That's a very serious claim. And what about the funding for the clinics?
Apparently, NHCON collected fees, about 6 Saudi riyals from each pilgrim for clinic services. That's around 155 million. It was paid to a Saudi firm.
Which then failed to get the operating licenses.
Allegedly, yes. So now pilgrims are relying on medics from their state pilgrim boards, which apparently goes against Saudi rules.
This sounds like a mess. And the cost for that initial 300-person team must have been substantial.
Estimates suggest around $3 billion might have been spent just on the personnel. Plus, there are concerns about data collection without central coordination.
Is there any reason given for why the licenses weren't granted?
There's speculation it might be because Saudi authorities suspected the team was inflated with non-medical people. But that's just speculation for now.
Understandably, there are calls for investigations by the EFCC and ICPC.
Yes, into the team's composition and how the funds were actually spent. It demands scrutiny.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift to international news. Something happening with U.S. student visas.
Yes, reports indicate the Trump administration has ordered a halt to scheduling new student visa interviews. This affects the F, M, and J visa categories globally.
Halt? Why?
The directive, apparently from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, is said to be in preparation for expanding social media screening and vetting requirements for students.
So existing appointments are okay, but no new ones being scheduled for now.
That seems to be the situation. It looks like an escalation in the tensions between the White House and U.S. universities.
It started with concerns over anti-Semitism, but now seems broader.
It seems to be widening into a sort of offensive regarding the role of foreign students more generally. These students make up nearly 6% of U.S. higher education, contributing a lot academically and financially.
Has Rubio said anything about this before?
Yes, there were previous statements about potential restrictions linked to student activism, so this might be related.
We'll keep an eye on that. Back home now, news from Lagos State University, LASU.
Yes, LASU has reportedly removed Professor OTF Abanaconda as the Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture.
Why the dismissal?
It follows quite serious allegations of degrading and inhumane treatment of students, specifically at the university's school farm.
And a new dean has been appointed.
Yes, Dr. Oladele Ojeromi is now the acting dean.
Were these concerns raised publicly before?
Yes. The Take It Back movement, TEEB, highlighted the issues, and the National Association of Nigerian Students, NAN-S Southwest Zone D, had earlier condemned the professor.
What were their specific complaints?
They alleged tyranny and abuse of power going back over 2 decades, talk of a toxic environment, calls for investigation.
I think I recall reading something about final year students facing really bad conditions.
That's right. Reports mentioned prison-like conditions, forced farm labor, even being denied access to hostels. Students were apparently celebrating the dean's removal, which tells you something.
Definitely sounds like further investigation is needed there. Okay, next, the World Health Organization is facing budget issues.
Yes, the WHO has had to cut its budget significantly. This comes after the withdrawal of the United States, which was its biggest donor.
How big a cut are we talking about?
The proposed 2026-2027 budget is down from $5.3 billion to $4.2 billion. That leaves a funding gap of about $1.7 billion.
That's a substantial gap. How is the WHO funded usually?
It's a mix. There are assessed contributions, basically membership fees, but it's become increasingly reliant on voluntary contributions from countries and organizations.
Have they tried to address the gap?
Yes. There was a recent agreement at the World Health Assembly to increase those assessed contributions, the membership fees, by 20%, and there have been some pledges from donors.
But the U.S. withdrawal, started under President Trump, is the main cause of this strain.
It's a primary driver, yes. The U.S. froze funding and initiated the withdrawal process. And just recently, the current U.S. Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., sent a critical video message to the WHO Assembly.
So political tensions are definitely impacting global health funding. Is the WHO making internal changes too?
They are. Reports mention reorganization efforts, reducing executive management positions and departments to cope with the financial pressure.
A difficult situation for a vital global body. Finally, let's turn to the war in Ukraine. Any developments on the diplomatic front?
Well, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has made a proposal. He's suggested a three-way summit.
Three-way. With whom?
With U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss ending the war.
That's ambitious.
Yeah.
Hasn't Putin rejected meetings before?
Russia previously rejected a bilateral meeting in Turkey, and the Kremlin line has generally been that a meeting would only happen after some kind of agreement is reached.
And President Trump has expressed frustration with both sides, hasn't he?
Yes. Frustration that they haven't reached a deal. Zelensky seems willing to try anything, saying he's open to a Trump-Putin-me meeting in any format.
Has he coupled this with anything else, like calls for action?
Yes. He's still urging the U.S. to impose really strong sanctions on Russia's banking and energy sectors. He noted Trump confirmed potential sanctions if Russia doesn't stop.
Meanwhile, the fighting continues.
Intensely. Reports of massive aerial attacks from both sides recently. Ukraine apparently launched almost 300 drones in one wave. Zelensky also mentioned Russia possibly amassing troops near the Sumy border.
And what about those peace deal demands Russia was supposed to send?
Ukraine says they still haven't received the promised memorandum. So the diplomatic path is, well, it's complicated. Zelensky is meeting the German chancellor soon, though, and Russia's foreign minister, Lavrov, did mention details on a second round of negotiations would be announced soon. So it may be a small opening there, but the situation remains incredibly tense.
Indeed. A lot happening across the board today.
Definitely keeps us on our toes.
Thank you for listening to the Today's Top News Headlines on IAMC Radio and Podcast.